Hello, everyone. I think there's still a few more joining us. We'll just wait a moment. All right. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. Happy International Women's Day. Before we begin, I'd like to say an enormous thank you to my colleague Margaret McGuffin at Music Publishers Canada for producing such an outstanding panel, Oslam and Almudena for their hard work, as well as the incredible speakers today for joining us. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our wonderful supporters at Factor for making this program possible. To begin our panel, I'd like to start by stating our land acknowledgement. I have the honor, like many of us here, to be the guest on the traditional lands and waters of the Penton and Wendat peoples, the Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee confederacies, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, as well as many other Indigenous nations, some of whose names are no longer remembered. We acknowledge all who came before us and have traveled the lands and waters of this territory. By saying the names of its original keepers, we remember that this territory continues to be subject to the Dish and One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacies and Three Fire Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto, where we are situated, is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across the continent, and we are grateful to work in the community on this territory. While reconciliation means many different things to each community, let it compel us all to move beyond words of acknowledgement. It is my honor to introduce Amanda Rayom, a citizen of the Métis Nation and a singer-songwriter that has self-managed her music career for over 15 years. She has released 5 full-length albums, and her latest, titled Keep a Fire, was nominated for a Juno Award and won a Canadian Folk Music Award for Indigenous Songwriter of the Year. Amanda identifies as she, her, and is an active and proud member of the LGBTQ2S+ community. An engaging performer, Rayom has developed her career in Canada and Europe, where she tours regularly. One of her greatest gifts as a songwriter is her ability to take the personal and make it universal, drawing upon her own experience to deliver messages with a wide resonance. Amanda is the Director of Operations for the International Indigenous Music Summit, co-founder of Ishcode Records, and project coordinator for the creation of the National Indigenous Music Office here in Canada. Welcome, Amanda, and thank you for joining us today.
Chimigwech. I suppose I'm not touring regularly right now. So Edmin Bojo, Kinawea Bindagan, Nikichinen Damwa Baminan, Amanda Rayom Indigenous, Anishinaabe Ake Indonjaba, Anishinaabe Ake Indonji, Métis Indao, Inigamit Ikwe Indao. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Sam. My name is Amanda Rayom. Today I'm coming to you from unceded Algonquin Anishinaabeg land, also commonly known as Ottawa. As Sam said, I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation. My Métis relatives, they come from Red River. My Anishinaabe relatives come from Lac Seul, which is northwestern Ontario. And I also have German and Scottish ancestry. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm so excited to be here today. Happy International Women's Day. I think every day is Women's Day, or for folks identifying as women. So yeah, I was asked to come here today just to talk a little bit about land acknowledgements. And, you know, when I was thinking about what would be good to say, because Sam does such a good job at acknowledging the territory where she is, it made me think about how land acknowledgements for me are really about relationship. They're not just about saying where you are, you know. And so, you know, I think by now we know that Christopher Columbus didn't discover the Americas, neither did the European explorers who preceded him. And this land that I'm on, and several other people, as commonly known as North America, it was and still is Turtle Island. And this land has been inhabited for well over, tens of thousands of years by thriving traditional territories, bands, and confederacies of Indigenous people. And, we're still here despite all the, genocidal attempts at assimilating and colonizing Indigenous people. So, at the summit, the International Indigenous Music Summit, we're so excited to be partnering with music publishers on a lot of things, including, having me here today to talk about this. And that relationship, for example, is, we've been working really hard on a lot of things. And when I mentioned before, when Margaret asked if I would speak about this, and relationship came to mind, it made me think about how relationship really is the most important thing and is the core, for me, the core reason why we even do land acknowledgements at all. And so land acknowledgements, I've seen them be re-inspired by the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They're an honest and historically accurate way to recognize the traditional First Nations, Métis, and or Inuit territories of a place. They commemorate and recognize and respect our principal kinship and relationship to the land, the earth, our first mother. We all have that in common. And, for me, the relationship to the land is just as important as the relationship to everything else, each other, humans, plants, the water. There is really no difference. And everything is relational. It's sort of, to me, what keeps everything going forward. So when thinking about land acknowledgements, it's about honoring that relationship, like I mentioned, to the land and to the, the original custodians that since time immemorial, have been here, taking care of the land. So, as Shoshona Kish, she's my business partner on several things and also one of my best friends. And she really has been talking to me a lot about how relationships are at the core of everything. And when we don't have those relationships, that's when things, don't move forward in a good way. And so, if you're looking to do a land acknowledgement, something that came to mind is that people can make relationships first, instead of being extractive and trying to get the information that you need for your presentation or whatever it is. When you have those relationships with people, making phone calls to ask, or even if we make mistakes, those things don't feel as scary or as hard when we've built that and nurtured that sort of reciprocal relationship. So yeah, that's really why I'm here today, is just to talk about that and how important it is that we're all working together to build, a strong foundation, and really think about the generations to come and the work that we're here to do together. So, Chimi Gwetch for having me, and I hope everyone has a great panel.
Thank you very much, Samantha, and thank you very much, Amanda. Okay, I'm gonna give just a moment to my colleagues joining. Well, happy International Women's Day 2021 to everybody. It's great to welcome so many of you here today. My name is Almudena Velasco, and I'm Public Affairs Executive at ICMP, the global trade body for the music publishing industry. ICMP represents over 90% of the world's published music, working on behalf of majors, indies, and 64 national industry associations across 6 continents. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to a panel discussion on the year ahead in music publishing. And it is a privilege for me to be co-moderating this panel comprised of some of the most outstanding international music industry executives. Each brings high-level expertise on the music publishing industry to our audience today, and each represents an incredible success story. Before passing the floor to my colleague Margaret, just a quick note on some housekeeping. Please note that there is a difference between the chat box and the Q&A box, so we encourage all the attendees to submit your questions in the Q&A box. So ask your questions during the session, and at the end of the session, we will have around 10 minutes of Q&A. We will unmute people to ask directly the questions to the panelists. If not, we will read the questions. And finally, we encourage you to use Twitter today. So please use the handles and the hashtags that my colleagues will be sharing now in the chat box. So with no more delay, I pass the floor to Margaret McGuffin, Executive Director of the Music Publishers Canada, ICMP's national group there. So thank you very much and looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Almudena. I'm so happy you could co-host with me today. And thank you to all the panelists. So now we're going to dig in. And instead of me reading your bio, I want each of you to just quickly tell the group a little bit about yourself and your company. Mary Megan?
Thanks, Margaret and Almudena and everyone who's hosting the panel today. It's really great to be celebrating International Women's Day, which has such a wonderful group of women. My name is Mary Megan Peer. I am the CEO of Peermusic, which is a large independent global music publisher. I'm based in Amsterdam, and I work with our 38 offices around the world to grow our music publishing business. And also our neighboring rights business, which is an area we just got into last year.
Great. And Jennifer?
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Again, it's wonderful to be here for International Women's Day. Sorry. My name is Jennifer Mitchell. I'm the president of Redbook Songs and its predecessor, Casablanca Media Publishing. We are a music publisher headquartered in Canada. We are a global music publisher and also a sub-publisher for many wonderful songwriters and publishers that we represent.
She's also vice chair of Music Publishers Canada with Vivian. So Vivian, tell us about yourself.
Everyone, nice to see everyone virtually. Happy International Women's Day, even though every day is International Women's Day. I am here in Toronto. I am the GM of Warner Chappell Music Canada, which is a major publisher. And we represent writers from Canada, but I also represent writers from all over the world. I have writers based in Nigeria, excuse me, Jamaica, and in the States. And we're a full service music publisher, and I do sit on boards with Jennifer, as Margaret said, on music publishers and SOCAN. And I'm super excited to be here with everyone today.
Thank you. Lucie.
Hi, everyone. And thank you for having me in this incredible company. I'm Lucie Caswell. I'm the General Manager and Chief Policy Officer of the Music Publishers Association of the UK. We represent over 95% of the UK songwriters through our 200 members, and that's publishers ranging from your iconic indies through to the international majors. As part of the MPA group, we also have PMLL, which is sheet music licensing, printed music licensing for schools and choirs, and also MCPS, representing over 22,000 songwriters amongst its membership. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to have you all here. I have first a short question that I would like each of you to answer, and allow me to start with you, Mary Megan. First, congratulations once again on your recent appointment as Chief Executive Officer of Peermusic, as CEO now of the largest independent music publisher and also an incredible company heritage. Could you describe to the audience your professional pathway to this point?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the congratulations. Although I am a third generation music publisher, I didn't work in this business until 13 years ago. I started my professional career on Wall Street, where I spent most of my time in M&A for media and entertainment and intellectual property firms. It was a great background for some of the M&A that we do today. But it also lacked a lot of what working for an operational company and having relationships with creative songwriters and the like. So 13 years ago, I moved over into the publishing space for Peermusic. Given my background, I started working directly with our CFO and doing a lot on our acquisition front. In the years since then, I have run our office in Argentina. I've worked directly with a number of our offices in Latin America and in Asia. And right now I am living in Europe and working a lot with our neighboring rights businesses here, as well as our local offices.
Fantastic. Thank you. Over to you, Jennifer. You play such a prominent role in both the Canadian and international industry. Please Tell us about the professional journey which brought you to be the president of Red Brick Songs, among other things.
Well, actually, I started as an entertainment lawyer. And I guess, like a lot of entertainment lawyers, I quickly got bored in private practice and decided I need to do something much more interesting with my life. So I left private practice to form Casablanca Media Publishing with another senior law colleague. Casablanca started off with a number of record labels. We even did television production. And music publishing. And then eventually we realized that music publishing was our passion and decided to concentrate on that. So it's been 20 years now, and it's been quite an interesting journey. My business partner passed away about 10 years ago. So it's sort of been, along with my very wonderful team, of course, it's sort of been a solo journey since then. And, you know, it's been wonderful.
Great, wonderful. Music publishing is, our passion. So thank you. If I can turn to you, Vivian, as general manager of a major Warner Chappell, and in a huge market such as Canada, that's an incredible rise. So how would you describe your career path?
I think like a lot of people who get to music publishing, sometimes you fall into it. So I started in radio. That's where I started my professional life, so to speak. My degree was in audio engineering, and I was in radio for years, you know, being a program director, being on air, you know, doing production, all of that kind of stuff. I then moved on to work for a company headed by another wonderful woman, Denise Jones here in Canada, who was kind of full service, a smaller company. So it allowed me to learn a lot of different things. And she had a client that was signed to Warner Chappell. And at some point, my mentor and the woman that headed Warner Chappell at the time, they needed some help at Warner Chappell with something. And she basically volunteered me and seconded me over there for a while. And I did that. And then at the time, I was also doing a bunch of freelance music supervision. And when I got there, I realized I could do the same thing with a bigger catalog. And it became my passion, to be frank, it became my passion. Representing songs, amazing songs and songwriters was something I really enjoyed doing. And I still got to do all that other stuff I was doing with film and TV. And I've been in the music publishing business now for 20 years. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very, very great and brilliant. Lucie, in 2018, you were appointed as General Manager and Chief Policy Officer of the Music Publishers Associations in UK. So tell us about your journey to become the lead on shaping policy in one of the top 3 music industries. And in fact, it's a role that we see you delivering daily as colleagues. So tell us about your journey.
Thanks, Almudena. As Vivian says, how much is accident, how much is design, I suppose. But I started in independent music publishers, just a stage managing student who was desperate to get into music, I suppose. I was that person running around, you know, trying to keep people on time and on budget. That probably teaches you everything. I since then worked at PRS, our rights society, doing digital and online licensing. And following that, started my own company as in rights management and biz dev for innovation in particular. So negotiating for rights on both sides of the table and both sides of rights, actually, and working for both the sort of service side as well as rights holders. And since then, I suppose, as a negotiator, came into the more sort of trade body side to help negotiate the path on a collective basis.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your experience and wonderful stories. Now allow me to come back to you, Mary Megan. We would like to know, and I'm pretty sure many people in the audience would like to know about Peermusic's business today. The company was founded in 1928. You said that you operate 35 offices. I know that it's in more than 30 countries and with an impressive catalog of more than 500,000 titles. How have you seen the business change most in recent years? And also for those in the audience that they are less familiar with that, could you describe the work of a music publisher does on behalf of writers?
Absolutely. I think it might make sense if I started with the second half of your question first. Like Vivian, we describe ourselves as a full service music publisher. We pride ourselves on having close relationships with our writers, understanding their creative process, their preferences, how they want their music used in film and television and advertising. All those aspects are very important to us. As you mentioned, we're a very global company. We have a wide footprint around the world. And that's been something that's been with us almost from the start, not 1928, but as early as the 30s, my grandfather was establishing offices abroad, and having that network and close cultural ties in many different countries remains a core aspect for us today, including finding opportunities for songwriters, not only in their own markets, but in other markets. I think particularly our Swedish writers do a lot of work in Asia, especially Korea these days, Japan, Taiwan, and really being instrumental in developing those opportunities that most songwriters wouldn't have a network to do by themselves. We also pride ourselves on having, through our network, professionals in the sync space in every major synchronization market in the world. So these folks not only know our catalog and know our songwriters, but they understand the local markets and the opportunities that are appropriate for the music there. We're also very active in licensing the digital services. In some cases that's direct, and some we go through hubs such as ICE, or in Latin America, the Ventanilla Única. We also have our own in-house proprietary copyright royalties and tracking system, which is a significant development, certainly a significant effort in both time and resources for our company. But we feel like in today's day and age, with the data simply growing so quickly, that it's very important to have a system that all of our offices use and can have the ability to process and really produce best-in-class statements for our songwriters. I was just checking, we're obviously closing a royalty period, as I'm sure many folks on this call are. And this, in the past 2 periods, our data has gone up 50% year over year, and it just continues to grow like that. So I think that's certainly a challenge for our industry, a challenge for all our companies to make sure that we're able to deal with this data, and then also presented it to our songwriters in kind of a viable format. So that's a little bit about what Peermusic does and what a publisher does, and our relationships with our songwriters. In terms of how the world has changed, COVID hasn't fundamentally changed what we do. Obviously, there are still people writing music, there are still people performing music, even though it might be in a very different way than it was a year ago. And our songwriters, still expect to get remunerated for that music. So I think kind of the biggest change in the music industry itself was the complete shutdown in touring. And for our writers who are also performers, that had a fairly immediate impact on their bottom line. And it's obviously still a concern because it seems unlikely that they're going to be touring to full venues kind of at the same level of profitability anytime soon. So that I think is an impact that publishers are seeing. Obviously, we and others are working with writers who are in that situation on alternate forms of income. On the plus side, it has given some of our writers a little more time to write songs and not to be on the road and to do co-writes. So I think we've all appreciated that. And we had to get creative just like any other business, whether or not it's Zoom writing camps, or say our Swedish writers who used to go to Seoul 2 or 3 times a year are now meeting online to do that type of thing. So we're just really finding new opportunities rather than a significant shift in the fundamentals of the business. I think like others, we continue to be concerned by fair remuneration for songwriters online, and clearly the rapid growth in live streaming needs to be met with rapid growth in income in that area, and we're working on that around the world.
Thank you. Very interesting comments on digital and live streaming. So let's look ahead now. What are the big plans and the priorities based on what you have been mentioning for Peermusic in 2021?
So I think continuing to sign new writers remains a top priority. We actually, before the pandemic started in the early months of 2020, we made several big signings, including Pooh Bear, who's a Justin Bieber collaborator, and De La Ghetto, who's a Latin urban star. That's an area that we've been spending a lot of time in. So continuing to grow our relationships with writers is absolutely a priority. Sync continues to be hugely important to us, and with the increase in Netflix and Amazon and other competitive services putting out their own content, that's certainly increased opportunities, particularly since they're doing a lot of local content for music that wasn't necessarily getting a lot of television opportunities in the past, places, smaller territories, particularly where they've looked for local music. So that's a priority for us. I mentioned at the beginning that we just got into the neighboring rights space at the end of last year. We acquired 3 companies in neighboring rights, one of whom serves generally label owners, master owners, and the other 2 which work within the performer side. But we are working to integrate that and to be able to offer neighboring rights management as an additional service to our songwriters.
Yeah, you mentioned fair remuneration, synchronization, and copyright is central to your work and indeed to any creator or creative business. So what do you perceive as, also adding to what you have already mentioned, but what did you perceive as the main copyright issues or challenges in the market today, either addressing the value gap or valuation of digital music in streaming services, as you mentioned? And also, do you see a value acting collectively as a whole industry for tackling these challenges?
Sure, I've mentioned some of the challenges that we face, but around the world, there are obviously different concerns. In Europe, we're anxiously waiting to see how the negotiations with the major digital providers change once Article 17 is fully enacted. We're around the world, we're always monitoring new digital platforms which may not have licenses yet. Clubhouse, Roblox, for example, right now, to make sure that, first of all, that they license, but then that the license really fairly reflects how they're using music, because music is so inherent in those services, and the social world has just grown immensely during this time as we have perhaps fewer outlets in person. There've been, in developing markets, there's been some substantial changes in copyright law, thinking of places like China, also in India. And so we're eagerly awaiting to see how those are enacted, that the societies are set up that can properly correct and put those laws into action. In India, they need to, I think there's some clarification around the laws with regards to broadcasters paying music rights. So that's certainly an area to follow. And then an issue that I'm sure many of us have seen around the world is Netflix agreements, particularly with newer writers, where they're looking for work for hire scenarios and tire buyouts. And the world that we live in, we really prefer that the writers can benefit from the ultimate upside of their work, that they're not bought out if at all possible. So I think that's an area that we've certainly spent some time discussing with our writers. Of course, many writers who have a publisher are already a little bit beyond that stage of their career, but still, it's an important thing for the entire industry. In terms of acting collectively, absolutely. I don't think any publisher could deal with that range of issues and more by themselves. Clearly, as an American, I have to add the caveat that to do it on the right side of the antitrust authorities is important. But most of these issues, we're all facing together. So when possible, I do think it's very positive to work together.
Thank you very much. Good points that you mentioned, and thank you for sharing your perspective on China regulation and India and Article 17, in which we work very hard to ensure that it's transposed in a right way to ensure fair remuneration and so on. Over to you, Margaret. Thank you very much, Mary Megan.
Thank you. I just want to also say we love our Peermusic Canada office, and they're very active in the association. So Jennifer, we spend a lot of time together, and one of my favorite things, other than talking about copyright, is talking about your songwriters and your sub-publishers. Can you tell us a little bit more about your company and specifically about your writers and what you're doing in terms of writer development?
Sure. We represent over 50 songwriters actually that we co-publish worldwide. We also represent a number of songwriters and publishers as their sub-publisher for Canada or the US or the world. Some of the more recognizable songwriters that we sub-publish include the estates of John Lennon and Roy Orbison. We represent Joan Jett, Steve Miller, Lil Kim, as well as some really great independent music publishers like Because Music and Abco, Carlin, Big Yellow Dog, Buddha, so many great publishers. On our songwriter side that we co-publish a lot of different songwriters. A lot of them are Canadian. Charlotte Cardin, the Royal Alberta Advantage, Great Lakes Swimmers, Gene O'Brien, Fast Romantics, Dan Davidson, Russell Broom, just to name a couple.
So we love a lot of them, and they've been in a lot of our song camps, and we've worked with them. Tell us, it's been a really interesting year, not a normal year, and that doesn't need to be said, but what are the priorities for looking forward in 2021, and what are your big plans?
Sure. I think publishers tend to have similar priorities no matter what's going on. I mean, I think continuing to develop the career of our songwriters is always job number one, priority number one. And we just sort of, deal with whatever challenges are in front of us. This year, obviously, co-writing has been a massive issue. We used to be wonderful in-person co-writing trips, and now we've had to pivot to remote co-writing. Some songwriters are better at that than others, so that still remains a bit of a challenge, and I think we're all looking forward to being able to have in-person co-writing again. But it has also created some really great opportunities where we've been able to do some more co-writing with writers perhaps that were a little bit more remote, or with other writers in places that we couldn't necessarily justify the travel expense. So I think that's been a wonderful opportunity as well. We're always looking to find licensing opportunities for the songs that we represent. That's, like Mary Megan was talking about, sync is always an issue. It's always important, and we're always going after as many as we can for our songwriters. But we also look for merchandising deals. We look for digital opportunities. Sometimes we're looking for book deals as well. We have a number of songwriters that are also independent artists. So we often get very much involved in promoting their projects. And that's something that we are doing in 2021 as well. So whether it comes to hiring, radio promotion teams directly and publicists, or financing those teams, or promoting them as songwriters, making sure they have a Spotify publisher pages, whatever we can do to promote their careers, that's definitely a priority. And then obviously finding and always looking for new talented songwriters to sign. That's very important. And I would say in 2021 right now, one of the priorities for us on the admin side has been, with the MLC launching, make sure that all of that is underway, that we have our ducks in a row, and that we're on top of whatever digital licensing issues we have to deal with. We have a lot of ongoing projects about how to better monetize certain digital platforms, so that's always ongoing.
Yeah, and you and I have had a few discussions this year too, because of COVID. We're seeing a lot of full-length kids programming showing up now on advertising tiers, and yeah. I know for Jennifer, for you, that's a big part of your business. And do you want to just comment on that a little bit?
Specifically, well, I mean, there is definitely a lot of programming that wasn't necessarily out in the free tiers before that is showing up. So just trying to find ways to deal with some of these platforms, identify the content, and it always comes down to a data issue, really. Because of the way that these things are handled, how do you actually get the correct data to them? How do you convince them that, how do you come up with a system to monetize it and do it in a way that you actually can see those royalties, in the present day and not necessarily 10 years from now. So that's the challenge that we always face. And this year definitely became more of a challenge as more things went online. So, not only just dealing with content that might be on, say, a YouTube, but then also just dealing with live streaming and like we mentioned before. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's perfect. And which brings us to copyright and the core of having strong copyright laws. What are the priorities in Canada right now on copyright?
Well, one of our biggest is copyright term extension, which may surprise people that are not necessarily Canadian, but we are still Life plus 50 in Canada. Our country actually did agree to extend it to Life plus 70 in our trade agreement with the US and Mexico, but has not implemented it yet. So, you know, in the meantime, lots of wonderful, valuable, and very licensable songs are falling into the public domain. And as a consequence, we're pushing very, very hard to try to get the term extended as fast as possible. The other thing we've been looking at is site blocking, which is a big priority for us. So, you know, we need to amend the Copyright Act to allow court to grant a site blocking or, you know, de-indexing injunction to internet intermediaries. And, you know, it's really important because as you know, what's the point of copyright if you can't actually enforce it? So that's been a priority for us, I think, as a group of publishers locally in Canada.
Great, thank you. Vivian, I've got a few questions for you. You've been on our advisor on most things to do with song camps and virtual songwriting, and I know that you've been hosting some of your own camps. What have you learned and what have your writers learned about what works and what doesn't work and the path forward on virtual songwriting?
Actually, thanks. I actually don't think virtual songwriting is going to go away once we get back to normal, because I think we've learned that, you know, it's, as Jennifer said, it has been a wonderful opportunity, especially for those of us with smaller offices or people who may be in smaller territories or have smaller group of writers that may not, either from a budgetary perspective or just from a priority perspective, may not have had access to this amazing group of world of songwriters and artists, especially when artists are on tour. So obviously artists will go back on tour and certain part of life will go back to as it has been. But I think what we've been taught during this time, not only about how we work, but how our writers work, is that pretty much anything is possible. As Jennifer's pointed out, there have been a lot of people who have figured it out. I've had writers who, you know, had been putting off doing a setup at home, putting off figuring out how to run their own technology, and just had to get it together in order to be on a camp. We've had people do stuff, and I've watched people do stuff with the most limited of resources available to them in that moment. And then there's people who this just is not their thing. They figured that out. They're like, this is not my thing at all. I don't want to do this. I need to get back to in person. I like the vibe in the room. And I think all of those are valid. So, you know, all of us, the associations, we've had camps now, you know, MPC has had camps with ICMP. That was a great camp. There were a lot of people there. It was well run. We had one recently with some of our Warner Chappell offices around the world in Netherlands and France. We had some American writers. We did that with one of our co-publishers, our French sub-publisher here in Canada, who's on our board as well, Deanne Pinet over at Block Notes and her lovely team. And the teams that work for us just did a fantastic job getting like over 35 writers together over 2 different weeks to pull this off. And then they're just, what's come out of that is not just the immediate, you know, 4 or 5 days that they were together, but the biggest knock-on effect of that has been the continued relationship. We've had people call and go. We've gotten together since. We've done 4 more songs. To me, that's the biggest win out of the whole of this time, is that we've been able to get our writers in the room with people they would just never have had the opportunity to get in a room with before. Those people weren't open, they were on tours, and their priorities were different. Well, right now, every single artist and songwriter, doesn't matter how big or small you are, they're all in the same situation, and they all want to make sure they're staying creative. So we've learned some lessons. We've learned what doesn't work technically, what does work technically. I'm sure technology has come up greatly during this time, dealing with things like latency and all of the communication skills we've needed to get this to go. We've all seen new apps come online. The other thing is just, you know, even as a company, we have always had a global focus on an A&R perspective. We've always had global calls to talk about A&R, but during this time, it's really grown exponentially, where we literally have multiple calls by genre or by song. We have them at least, a couple times a week with our entire A&R staff across the world. And then what comes out of that inevitably is exactly the same thing. Hey, how do we get our writers together? We will have a group meeting, but then right after, I had another meeting the other night with people from my Swedish and German offices, just going, okay, let's bring this to a smaller thing. And what's coming out of that is more sessions. So, I think everybody right at the beginning of this immediately went into go mode. We all were like, how are we going to, I don't want to use the word pivot again, but because we really, I find publishers, we don't really care how the thing happens. We just care that it happens and that we get paid at the end of the day. So we're not so caught up in, is it physical? Is it this or the change in technology? We're just like, okay, it's changed. How do we move forward? And I found that the publishers were very quick in doing that. And we've reached out a lot, both internally at our company, and obviously I've seen the different societies, the different organizations do the same thing, to reach out to the labels, to reach out to management groups and say, okay, here, this is what we're doing. Can you join us in this? And just bringing people to the party. And I do think that when we look back at this time, we'll see that music publishing around the world was really instrumental in keeping creation going during this time. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it, but I actually don't think it's going to go away. I think we're going to continue to do this, and we're going to continue to see fruit from it because it just makes sense. It just makes sense. Yeah, I look very much forward to the time where we can have a song camp with us physically being in the room and having the energy of getting together in the morning and talking about the day and what we're going to be working on and the pitches, and having A&Rs come by, having artists in the room, and then listening to those songs at the end of the day. Yeah, there's nothing like that. There really isn't. But this has been an exceptional time to have writers from as far as Japan to Canada to Europe, all on the same writing camp and at the same time. It's just been amazing, to be honest.
Well, Vivian, you volunteer a lot of your time. You get my call all the time, and most of the time say yes. And two of the things you've been working on this year, Music Publishers Canada is going to be launching our third call tomorrow for our Women in the Studio program, and you're one of the lead mentors and founder of that program. So I'd like you to comment on why that type of program is important, but also you've been involved in advance. So if you could quickly just tell the world about your work there.
Yeah, I mean, with Women in the Studio, it's an obvious one. If you go and look at the numbers, we just don't have a lot of female identifying producers amongst our ranks. We just don't have enough. Women always bring an amazing creativity to the room. They've always traditionally maybe been thought of more as top liners. And there are just a lot of amazing women that are either artists and doing their own stuff or working with other women, like some of the people we've had when we asked them why they wanted to work, do this program with us and brush up on their production skills and meet other women. A lot of them expressed the same thing, which is that they wanted to be able to put something forward that they didn't have the opportunity to have. They didn't have the opportunity to be mentored by another woman. They didn't have the opportunity to have a female identifying producer on their projects. And they talked about how different they felt that was. And so for them, this has been an amazing opportunity. And for those of you who want to go check it out, Women in the Studio, we encourage you to do it. And I encourage other organizations, somebody's put it in, thanks, Mark. I encourage our other organizations to really put that push out there. For me, starting in the studio, it's always been a passion for me to get more women behind the boards, because I feel truly as songwriters, especially, and as artists, it's very hard to articulate what it is you want from a technical perspective if you don't have the language and you don't have the skill set. So I've always encouraged two things. I've always encouraged women to pick up some sort of instrument, if it fancies, if they, get the fancy for that, and just so they can play around with music in that way. Obviously now there are a ton of digital tools that don't require you to pick up an instrument that you can still make music with. And then on the studio side, I've always encouraged artists, songwriters, and women who want to be producers that maybe are not artists at all to come into that space, because I feel like that energy is needed. We've seen it bear fruit. We've had some amazing women join the program. We've had hundreds of people apply. Sadly, we only been able to take like, between 6 and 8 women every year, and we're probably going to add another 8 women. And, this past year, it was really telling. We had women who have had success on their own already. We've had a producer from Vancouver, who is an artist herself, but had songwriting credits on artists like Summer Walker, in the States. We've had people who have been artists in their own right, in duos like Cave Boy in Montreal, and are now going on to like morph their career into different things. And I think that in our business, it's easy enough on a day like today, on International Women's Day, for us to come in here and there's like 3 or 4 of us that, we always end up being the same people that get called. I'm sure that the panel that we're having right now in the UK at my other company later on this afternoon, or maybe it was earlier today, same thing. You get called all the time. And for me, I want there to be another generation of people that get the phone call on International Women's Day. There need to be more women in the publishing business. There need to be more women in the studio. And so for me, that's why it's super important, is, it's just a given. Like I don't even know why it becomes a discussion. And so I think it's super important that we foster and mentor, and only good things can come of it. Because as a publisher, with some of the women, the first year, I think almost none of them were published. And then publishing deals. Yeah, but some of them got publishing deals out of that. And if they want to, that should be an opportunity for them. And then this other year we've just finished, some of them have had publishing deals, some of them don't have publishing deals. And the biggest thing that has come out of this for me is watching artists and songwriters have a positive relationship with the music publishing community. Because I think oftentimes when they go into spaces where people have had very negative relationships with companies, whether it's a publishing company, a record company, a DSP, whoever, management companies, often the rhetoric is, I never want to get involved with a publisher. I'm told to keep my publishing forever and ever and ever and never sell your publishing. And there's seriously a basic lack of understanding about general publishing in the world of the community of artists and songwriters. And so this has just been one way for us as publishers to be able to go, no, to point exactly to what Mary was talking about, how Mary Megan was talking about working with her writers, that relationship. This is them now seeing that in action. So I work with Cheryl, who's from Peermusic here in Canada, and Cheryl and I work together very hard to, and Michelle over at Sony, making sure that these writers and artists have a positive experience with music publishing, have a positive experience with music publishers, understand fundamentally what music publishing is, have some info that they can take on to the rest of their career, and also be ambassadors, hopefully, for music publishing and relationships with music publishing.
And we're getting tight on time, but just in a couple sentences, can you just direct people to what Advance is and where to look?
Advance is the Canada's Black Music Business Collective. We started it this year on the heels of what was started in the States on Blackout Tuesday. Our job here is to uplift Black music and Black people working in the music business here in Canada. It's a new nonprofit. I urge everyone to check it out. And if you have the opportunity in your territories to start something like that, I really hope that you do, because Black music over indexes in value in the streaming world, and yet there are hardly any people in executive positions being able to make decisions about the music and how our music is being used and the value of our music. And we're really trying to change that. And in the last year, we've seen a lot of changes, but there are a lot more to come. There can't just only be me. I say this 50 million times, just like we say about women, there definitely is only me in this country. And other territories are not doing dramatically better, even though they're way bigger than we are. But in order to see another me, we have to start somewhere, and we need to start in the middle. And so we're working, and me and my founders and our starting board are working really hard. We've just brought an ED on board in Keziah Myers, and we're super excited to work with organizations and do the work and do the real hard work with women in music, with music publishers, with Music Canada, and all over the world.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian. Lucie, turning to you, if I may, let's discuss on the challenges ahead from UK perspective. So I know you focus on many issues such as trade, technology, protection of copyright. So please tell us about the main policy issues in which UK MPA is focusing today.
Yeah, thank you. On the policy side, I suppose, is overwhelmingly occupied with copyright matters, as you'll know. So given some particular political decisions, we have a lot of trade agreements on our table now, and obviously issues to many agreements be made with Europe relating to the sector. And I think our job as a collective is to try to ensure that the interests of music publishing at all are on the government's agenda, that they are represented properly, and that's on a collective basis, as I say. So we're looking at companies of very different shapes and sizes and models and interests and genres, etc. So trying to coalesce those interests, although as you've heard here today, the common factor, the common driver of publishers is the songwriters and the talent. So that's behind all of our interests, whether it's talking about AI, whether it's talking about trade agreements, copyright standards, data standards, all of these sort of regime issues in various different copyright developments around the world. You know, that there's a lot of that talk, and we work very closely with ICMP on various of these issues. Other than that, would you like us to move more into the other aspects that are priorities for the MPA, or particularly stick to, if you like, the sort of technical policy ideas?
It's up to you, but we know ICMP, we know that you do a great job in that front. So if you would like to develop on policies, or if not, I mean, I know that UK MPC focuses a lot on lobbying and policy, as you already explained, but also plays a key role in empowering writers and emerging talent. So if you would like to explain to the audience your training and education programs as well, or you would like to focus on the policy side?
Sure, I suppose I asked because policy is such a
I know.
And whilst yes, I spend too much time talking to our civil service and governments and looking at copyright, I would hesitate to say that is the single priority of the MPA. And just to resonate as well with a lot that's already been said today, we have other really core aspects of our sort of strategic priorities over this year relating to access to the industry, widening the access to the industry, and the diversity and inclusivity of our business. So on the one hand, the MPA is very well known for providing courses in explaining what publishing is, what publishing jobs there are, how it works. It's actually called the 101 of music publishing. One's coming up soon. And that's to increase, if you like, the knowledge transfer between the executives and the expertise we have in the business to another generation of publishers and publishing professionals. We've opened up a new membership tier called Next Gen, which is specifically for individuals entering the publishing industry and people starting publishing companies. So to try and give you that access to experience and knowledge and networking with professionals already in the sector to be able to really drive your career forwards. We also, in that light, really want to make sure that we're conscious of who's involved in these conversations, who has access, who has equity, who has some kind of equality in the business. So again, has been mentioned, if you like, kicked into action after Blackout Tuesday. We're undergoing both a structural, infrastructural and practical change to the MPA for our businesses, but also as I suppose, a demonstration of leadership for the publishing sector. And that includes looking at, as I say, the structural side, so how we recruit, who we recruit, actually taking an external expertise and extra counsel to inform us of how to, if you like, inform and run a more equitable business. But it's really important to all of us that these conversations aren't just left to a panel, and they inform everything that we do in the way that we do it. So all the events and courses I mentioned are pledged to racial, ethnic and gender diversity and equality, and also the new initiatives for this year. Our key priorities for us are looking at access to the business and, if you like, development through the business. Really sort of resonated with me with Vivian talking about where the next generation is. And so whilst we have a scholarship program specifically to focus on Black and minority ethnic young professionals to get into the business, our mentoring program is actually looking at career progress. So who's getting to positions of authority, to positions of decision making, and bringing in experts and long-standing professionals within our community to mentor a gender balance of racially and ethnically diverse young professionals and management level professionals to get to those board tables. Lastly, we realised that publishing looks on site like something that is or isn't for a certain group of people. So really bringing to the fore the visibility and voices of the diversity of our community in terms of blogs, role model aspects, and giving voice and, if you like, that access to knowledge that has been talked about a lot today. Those are really core parts of our priorities for the year ahead, alongside all of the governmental and copyright haggling that we have to do.
Exactly, and you work very hard on that. I'm aware of that. Thank you, Lucie, for these very interesting and necessary initiatives you mentioned. We are running out of time, but I hope everyone has 10 minutes, extra minutes. So in that case, we can open the floor to a couple of questions that should be answered a bit short. So Margaret, you have picked already a couple of questions to our panelists?
Yeah, and I'm going to
Perfect.
summarize them as opposed to reading out one particular, because we've got a couple of themes here. And maybe we could just do a quick round around the group.
Perfect.
We've got some songwriters on the webinar today, and they're just saying, how do you find writers? How do you, what is that time when a writer is ready to have a publishing deal? And on the other end of the spectrum, we have somebody asking about these new big catalog song deals that are happening with hedge funds and investment companies. So you can dig into either end of that, and I'll have Jennifer just talk about that.
Sure. How do we find songwriters? You know, I've had songwriters ask me this in the past as well. And, you know, I always hate answering this question because the response is, we find you, you don't usually find us. Which means that, you know, if you're active in your career, if you're writing, if you're being creative, we will find out about you. And, you know, we may look to bring you on to develop a songwriter, or obviously if you're a little more advanced in your career, maybe a different kind of deal. But we sign relatively few songwriters from unsolicited submissions. That doesn't mean that we don't listen to them, and maybe that, you know, some deal in the future may happen, but the likelihood of that is low. I honestly, I think just being, you know, practicing your craft, getting out there, networking, writing with other people, you know, you start developing that talent, we will find out about you. And that's usually the best way, in my experience. I don't know if you want to talk about the large deals that are happening or not.
You're muted to Margaret.
It's, pardon me?
No, Margaret. But go ahead, please.
Oh, you know, it's a lot of consolidation right now in the industry. That's what's happening with a lot of these deals. I find it really interesting because from the perspective of a publisher, you know, at the same time that we have these very large investment deals and a lot of money coming into the music publishing space, we also have this pandemic going on, and we have songwriters and creators who, you know, discovered when they couldn't tour that they were not making a lot of money from songwriting in terms of the streaming pie. So I think what's interesting is that, you know, this is kind of shone a light on the issue of how much do publishers get from that streaming pie. And with all of these things kind of happening at the same time, I do hope in the future that we may see an increase in the amount that songwriters and publishers actually receive from streaming pie. Hopefully it goes up.
Mary, Megan, or Vivian, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add to the finding songwriters. I mean, we're now in a space, especially now that all of us have been home and we're not out looking at shows and going to shows all week and trying to find new artists that way. I mean, I've been everywhere everyone else has been on. You know, I've been on TikTok, and I've been in all these other places. And, you know, I agree with Jen that it's very rare that we do find people unsolicited, but I actually have run into a lot of new songwriters on these platforms like TikTok, and they're showing up in our reports that we, you know, that we get on this kind of stuff. You will never replace your gut on signing. You can never completely replace people in the A&R process. I think that will never be replaced totally by AI, but AI does help. Like, you know, data helps, and certainly in the world that we're in right now, a place like TikTok, as big as it is, helps to shrink it a bit. And to find that, I found recently a woman who's just down the road from us in Mississauga who has massive numbers on TikTok, and never knew about her from Toronto. Now, it may very well be that she came up during this time of the pandemic when we were literally not outside. So maybe if it was a different time, she may have actually come to our minds at some point. But I think that at this stage, we all just have to employ everything we can to reach the audience and the group of songwriters that are out there. That being said, we're all fairly accessible. I have people who DM me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, anywhere that I can possibly be found. I have been pitched music. So I think, yes, we find you, but I also think people find us. If they're really looking and interested, they usually find us.
Mary Megan, a final word on this before we close?
Sure. I think we've kind of covered the how we find songwriters and how they find us fairly extensively. You know, being out and working with writers who do have publishing deals often mean that you are going to meet publishers that way too. So that is pretty huge for us, signing co-writers when we hear good things about their work from our existing writers. So that's an extensive network. I think if I read the question in the chat box correctly, the question about hypnosis was kind of comparing a songwriter's experience with hypnosis compared to some other publishers. And I think it's important just to note that hypnosis doesn't sign writers to develop new catalogs with them. Everything that hypnosis does is closed catalogs, is works that have already been created. And so it's very different than signing and developing a songwriter. It's a different process in terms of what they're doing in the industry. Certainly some of their comments about fair remuneration and the digital marketplace. It'll be great if we can see some of that for all of us kind of come to be. But I just wanted to point out that question wasn't exactly how they run their business.
Great. Almudena,
thank you.
Today.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to the great panelists today. It was incredible. Thank you for the last remarks on different topics. Just bear with me a couple of minutes more, the attendees, please, because we have an amazing video. And I would like just to close and thank you very much for your insights, informative insights. ICMP, at ICMP, it's a privilege to work with you to improve this industry for music publishers. So before closing, please allow me a bit of advertisement. There will be another webinar on music industry data, systems, and collective management hosted by ICMP this Wednesday at 11 a.m. New York time, London 4 p.m., Paris 5 p.m. So we will hear from experts from ICE, DDEX, and Orpheum. So please check this out. Check at ICMP Twitter feed for details. And my colleagues will be pouring the link for registering to that webinar in the chat box. So please bear with me a couple of minutes more. We have an amazing video with voices from across the industry, from inspirational music professionals. I would like just to thank you as a personal remark. I would like to call on all of us across the international music sector to continue promoting and working for gender equality, diversity, and to nurture the inspirational role models of the future. Thank you very much, and check out our video that we will play now.
ICMP has asked me to talk about the importance of women in the music industry. Women are important because we're half the population with at least half the brain power. and listening to different perspectives raises the bar for us all.